Sony RX10 Mark IV versus Panasonic G9. I'm already loving this comparison. I think that if you can see why I'm already loving it, you might appreciate it too. Let's get the big stuff out of the way quick. Sensor size, manufacturer, all that stuff, etc, etc, etc. Micro Four Thirds is a 1/4 size sensor as full frame, making it a 2x crop from full frame. The RX10 Mark IV is a 1-inch type sensor from Sony, making it a 2.7x crop from full frame. So you still are losing a ton of sensor size with both of those. My biases are towards full frame. In most of my content, I try to admit to that so that everybody's on the same page. I don't think, however, that keeps me from being able to look at a lot of these great products that are smaller than full frame objectively. And for all of y'all who are regulars here, thank you so much for your patience during the repeat, and I'd love it if you'd smash the like button to help support me a little bit. I think the video with the most likes that I've gotten so far was 650, and I want to just thank everybody that helped me reach that milestone. So that was a huge deal for me, so thank you very much. So I mentioned I was a full frame dinosaur, right? But it's odd because I've actually been preferring my Alpha 6300 for just about everything I've been shooting lately, and it's been a much better camera for what I've been needing, and what I've been needing is a bunch of dynamic range, and the 6300 actually has substantially more dynamic range than my 6D, and so it's been really making me wonder about the value proposition of APS-C cameras as standalone devices where that's the only camera. And I think that's a really cool idea, and that's also kind of a tone shift internally for myself, saying maybe these smaller size sensors are really genuinely worthwhile. And I thought that was interesting and important to note in this video. I just want to reiterate, I don't have any issue with sensor sizes on anything except for smartphones. I think smartphones as cameras are the enemy. Just the way it is. Big conversations here will resolve themselves, if you will, around size, weight, and price, as well as value for money. The RX10 Mark IV, 1-inch type, 24-600 super zoom, f2.4 to 4 at $1,700 with the A9's color science and processor. G9 Micro Four Thirds interchangeable lens camera, $1,700 body only. So in order to get the lenses that would most equate to that super zoom lens on the Sony RX10, you're actually going to have to go with the pricier options. You're going to have to go with the 12-35 f2.8.2, the 35-100 f2.8.2, and the 100-400 f4-5.6, which is kind of a bummer. f4-6.3, sorry. Those lenses will, however, take you a little bit further than the RX10 Mark IV. However, Sony's clear zoom should make up that gap. That will, however, those three lenses will, however, bring the total for the G9 for the Micro Four Thirds system up to $5,400. That's a lot of money. You could instead go with the 12-45, the 12-42 and the 45-200, f3.5 to 5.6 and f4 to 6.6 for $700, bringing the total instead of $5,400 to $2,400. So there can be some savings. However, the variable apertures on those two smaller, lighter, cheaper zooms are actually going to, one, not reach as far, but importantly, two, be darker than the Sony's 2.4 to 4 equivalent. G9 has better stabilization than the RX10 Mark IV. RX10 Mark IV, can shoot 24 frames a second. The G9 can do 20. RX10 Mark IV can do 4K 30, can do 1080p 1000. G9 can do 4K 60 for 10 minutes, 4K 30 for 30 minutes, and up to 1080p 180. That 1080p 180 should be a much higher quality than whatever slow-mo you're going to get out of the Sony. However, you do have crazy high frame rate options on that Sony, which is a big deal. They both offer 20 megapixels of resolution, but one of the big differences is that the Panasonic G9 sensor is traditionally made, whereas the RX10 Mark IV's is backside illuminated. It's a stacked CMOS sensor. It's the same sensor really from the RX100 Mark V, which is superb. Keeping in tradition with the RX100 Mark V, it also borrows a 315 on-sensor phase detect autofocus points of that camera, class and industry-leading stickiness during tracking of those AF points. It's superb. Like I mentioned before, run by the A9's processor, it's gonna really be all over the place in a good way. It's gonna be able to catch everything. It's gonna be able to track really well. It's gonna track better than print on newspaper or white on rice or humps on camels. However, you can't zoom while you're tracking because the zoom is electronic. It will not zoom, and that will be a disappointment. G9's autofocus system is entirely contrast based. It's a CDAF system only. It does, however, have Panasonic's depth from defocus algorithms layered over top of it, which does add a ton of value, admittedly. Supposedly that's supposed to be able to, keep up at 20 frames a second with tracking. I have doubts, but I know that it'll still have issues in AFC and video, which is challenging because Olympus's lenses with the manual focus clutch won't perform as well as Panasonic's own lenses, a lot of which do not have that manual focus clutch on that body. One of the last things about the G9's autofocus system is that you'll be living with the knowledge that it's an autofocus system that isn't exactly modern. And for me, at any rate, that would really get under my skin. In terms of size and weight, the RX10 Mark IV is going to come in just over a kilo at 1095 grams, 1095 grams, 2.41 pounds. The G9 body only is 579. With that first set of lenses, the 2.8s to the 100 to 400, f4 to 6.6, that'll be 305, 357, and 985, bringing that grand total up to 2,226 grams, 2.226 kilos, or just about 5 pounds. That 100 to 400 really does tip the scales. However, that body-only G9 is actually 100 grams lighter than the lightweight full-frame 6D. However, it is also only 100 grams lighter than the lightweight full-frame 6D with a sensor that's a quarter the size. Keep that in mind. The latter two set of lenses, the 12 to 42 and the 45 to 200, those will weigh in at 110 and 370 grams respectively, bringing that total up to about 50 grams less than the RX10 actually, so that'll be a bit less than 2.4 pounds. I think we can be fairly confident that we've established that there aren't size and weight benefits with Micro Four Thirds in comparison, and with the G9 in particular, in comparison to the RX10 Mark IV. And these are especially true as they relate to the overall size of the package. You'll be having to carry 2 or 3 lenses as opposed to not having to carry any extra lenses. You'll have to be making extra space. You'll be oftentimes also carrying extra weight. A lot of that could be compromising. And again, I want to reiterate, it's that first set of 2.8, 2.8, 4 to 6.6 lenses that we need to be paying a lot more attention to in this comparison, because the other two, the 12 to 42 and 45 to 200, are substantially darker than you'll actually be getting on the RX10 Mark IV's 1-inch type sensor with f2.4 to 4 equivalency. So that's going to be a pain as well. So that means we're using those more expensive lenses for value for dollar. We're using those more expensive lenses for the weight comparison as well as price. That means, of course, that the G9 can't really compete with the RX10 Mark IV. The RX10 Mark IV kind of just blows the G9 right out of the arena. In my opinion, because the Sony sensor is stacked backside illuminated, it is going to be the better option. In terms of sensor architecture, the Sony is miles ahead of the Micro Four Thirds sensors we're seeing right now. And as a result, it's going to be on par in terms of light and noise performance, if not probably a little bit better. It's cheaper too. Like, who'd have thought that the world's best all-in-one super zoom beats out Panasonic's professional stills camera. Kind of makes me wonder what the angry commenters are going to say, given that I just said that this camera with the smaller sensor is probably the better one. But I guess I'll have to wait and see. So any astute observer could have probably put together that they could have made a lot of these comparisons themselves up until now. But what I want to do from here on out is kind of do what I do best on this channel, turn data into information and information into insights. I want to provide value to y'all with some commentary, some insightful thinking around these two cameras. In practice, we're seeing in this head-to-head kind of a struggle between two of the world's largest consumer electronics manufacturers. More abstractly, we're seeing a struggle between the old and the new. The G9 is the old ways. It's got a typically designed sensor, a sensor that could have been designed exactly as it is right now in 2008. The RX10 Mark IV is a great representation of what's new. It's got backside illuminated sensor. It's a stack CMOS design. It's got loads of on-sensor phase decked autofocus points that cover a majority of the frame. That complex sensor design can allow it to beat out Micro Four Thirds in tricky situations because of the performance enhancements that more complex sensor design and architecture has allowed. We're also seeing a fairly unsophisticated noise reduction algorithm out of the G9 when it comes to JPEG. It kind of gets to the point where, because the signal noise ratio is so bad, everything is a lot of noise, they haze over everything, where with Micro Four Thirds it can oftentimes be difficult to know what's in focus in the first place because of the sensor size. That noise reduction algorithm actually makes it impossible to tell what's in focus because everything's hazy. Personally, I'd rather have detail and some noise like the RX10 Mark IV gives. However, in good light, I think the color sciences of these two cameras are both on point. I think I'd take both and be very comfortable printing images that I'd made and putting them on my walls. With the RX10 Mark IV though, you are getting a baby A9. You are getting the A9's processor, you are getting the A9's color, and I think that pedigree really speaks volumes. Panasonic doesn't have that kind of pedigree. They possibly will be using the G9 to create that down the line, but I don't think that it will be quite as powerful as being able to say our flagship sports camera and our all-in-one super zoom have a lot of very similar, if not the exact same components. In my opinion, going back to that JPEG processing, I really feel like you need the detail. I feel like noise won't break an image like lack of detail will. It won't make an image... A little noise won't make an image unusable, but no detail, in my opinion, will make an image unusable. So here's what it comes down to. The RX10 Mark IV wins out in this head-to-head because it's cheaper, it's lighter, in an equivalent focal range, with a fantastic focal range, and really quite a fairly equivalent camera in nearly every regard to what we could see out of Micro Four Thirds. The G9 is a fantastic camera. I think it's very much overpriced for the value to dollar that it's offering, and the lenses that you'll need to make it stack up against a 1-inch type sensor super zoom, let alone APS-C and full frame cameras, which I just don't think that it can do yet. I think it could if Panasonic addressed the sensor and worked a lot harder to make those sensors better, put them on par with what we're seeing with backside illumination on Sony cameras. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm so stoked to be back with you. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one.